Imagine a city so dedicated to pleasure. Its very name has come to symbolize decadence and indulgence. This was Sybaris, a city founded in 720 BC on the sun-drenched coast of southern Italy. But Sybaris' legendary hedonism would also prove to be its undoing, becoming a cautionary tale against the neglect of duty in favor of extravagant entertainment. A tale that warns us, forsake your responsibilities and watch your world crumble, as Sybaris did under the onslaught of their rivals, the Crotonians. But how much of this is fact, and how much is fable? Did the Sybarites truly meet their end at the hands of an army wielding musical instruments instead of swords? And what does this story of this ancient city mean for us today? In this episode of Historical Quarrels, we'll delve into these questions and more. So, sit back, relax, and prepare to journey back in time to the rise and fall of the ancient pleasure city of Sybaris. Sybaris was founded in 720 BC by Achaean settlers. It amassed great wealth thanks to its fertile land and busy ports. It also amassed a huge population as a result of its policy of admitting aliens to its citizenry. Sybaris was a linchpin of the Magna Graecia. Ephorus gives a figure of around 100,000 inhabitants, and Strabo writes that its inhabitants on the Crathis occupied a circuit of 50 stadia, which is over 6 miles, or 9.7 kilometers for those who use the metric system and are so cool. He goes on to explain that Sybaris was a dominant power in the region, which ruled over 4 tribes and 25 subject cities. The inhabited area of the city occupied approximately 500 hectares, or 1,200 acres, which is roughly 1/36 the size of Houston, Texas. A few examples of Sybaris' list for, knacks for pleasures comes from the time the city's inhabitants took over the sanctuary of Athena on the Timpone della Motta, and through the ancient Greek equivalent of frat house parties there all the fucking time. Which really pissed off Dienicus Vernicus, who tries to kick them out, but the lovable heroes Bluticus and Bunicus are able to stop that happening through a series of wacky pranks, and their buddy Oedicus totally banging Vernicus' wife. And then they end up humbling Dienicus Vernicus by killing him, which is like totally rad, using the examples of their ancestors and utilizing the Trojan horse strat to sneak into a festival that Vernicus was having, but in place of a horse, they used a fake cake and popped out and cut Vernicus' head off. That might have happened, but probably not just like that. There were tales of Sybaris throwing large festivals on the sanctuary of Athena, but they didn't have an Animal House style adventure there that caused a lot of disruptions for a college dean. Anyways. Other descriptions of the wealth and luxury of Sybaris are through some of its more prominent citizens. Smindrides was one such citizen who is claimed by Herodotus to have surpassed all other men in refined luxury. He had the fanciest clothes, the tastiest of foods, the sexiest of slaves, and the tightest of buttholes. The ancient Greek historian Diodorus describes him as the wealthiest suitor for the daughter of Clisthenes of Sicyon. Fucking Greek. He sailed from Sybaris to Sion in a ship of 50 oars manned by his own slaves and surpassed even Clisthenes himself in luxury and tightness of the rectum. The story goes that when Smindrides arrived on the island, that Clisthenes himself was unconvinced that Smindrides was in fact of the status of wealth he boasted, and so challenged Smindrides to prove it through a competition, where the challenger and challenged would each be chained to a table with their robes up as to expose their asses. Then a strong man would come up and try to ram objects of varying width and girth up each contestant's ass, applying olive oil on each item if it failed to enter without it, and then trying again. This was done so because back then it was a symbol of status and wealth to have a tight rectum, meaning you were never dominated. It was said that Smindrides' asshole was so tight, they were unable to get an object the size of a needle inside his asshole, thus winning him the challenge, I can't speak today, and his future father-in-law's approval for the marriage. Claudius Linnaeus also alleges that Smindrides was so over-the-top sensitive, he could not sleep on a bed of rose petals because it gave him little bitty blisters of his poor little baby body. Seriously, could you imagine being called out like that by a future historian? You just like your whole legacy is you being called just a little bitch, essentially. So sad. Another Sybarite known by name is Alcimenes. The Roman historian Athenaeus, who is pretending to be Aristotle because he's just trying to get a point across, mentions that it was said Alcimenes dedicated a very expensive cloak as a votive offering, a gift or offering of religious significance for those that don't know, at the temple of Lacanian Hera. Here Athenaeus distorts the information by pretending to be someone he's not to push a fucking message, which is a big part of why discerning fact from fiction in the story is really fucking difficult, as many of the other historians who wrote on these subjects would also embellish the truth just to make it more exciting for the reader, or just to push some sort of agenda or philosophical message, which is just, they do shit that our news channel does today, but at least our news channels have like a reason to do it, because if they don't, they're gonna lose funding from their investors who also want like that agenda or message to get pushed, or like some political party who's like, no, you need to make sure that this is the law that we're trying to get people behind. You push it, you make it, you show them why this is bad. And it happens all the time. Back then, they're just like, oh, I need some clout. I need some people to be like, yeah, that's the historian I want to listen to. Fuck yeah. That's the guy. Anyways, let's continue on now. Okay, so that's enough about Sybaris' origins. Let's go ahead and get into Crotone. Back then, it was known as Croton, and its founder was Mycellus, who came from the city of Ripes in Achaea, in the northern Peloponnese. According to Ovid, the god Heracles appeared to Mycellus in a dream and commanded him to leave his native Achaea and seek out the stone-filled waters of Isar, like some sort of shitty D&D opening for a campaign. So Mycellus prepared to leave despite the laws that prohibited citizens from leaving their native land. When his plan was discovered by his fellow townspeople, they were not chill with it, but as a matter of fact, they were like, nah, dude, fuck that. If I can't leave, you ain't leaving, bitch. And they brought him to trial. So Mycellus would pray to the Greek god Heracles, and, unlike most of our prayers, this god actually answered, and the god responded by changing the color of the pebbles with which the townspeople had voted to convict Mycellus, showing that truly the greatest power that gods wield is in fact gaslighting. Because think about it. Gaslighting lets you manipulate reality. No other power really does that. You can convince people that something you did totally never fucking happened. And because of this, at the start of Catholic Rome, the Romans would remember the tale of Crotone's founding and instruct each of its popes how to use the same power that Heracles demonstrated. Just to, convince people that rules or things they thought were one way totally never happened, and they're fucking crazy for thinking that way. And unfortunately, this power would slip away from the clearly responsible and reasonable popes to regular people, and they would use it for evil gain. And that's something the leaders of organized religion would totally never do. I mean, come on. God chose them, so it's okay for them to gaslight us. Anyways, Mycellus was let go and he set sail. He soon reached the river Isar in southeastern Italy, where he discovered the raised burial mound of Croton, from whence the city's name would come. Years earlier, this same Croton had welcomed Heracles as the hero was passing through the area. Upon leaving, Heracles thanked his host by promising him that in 2 generations there would be a city in the spot where Croton lived. To which I'm sure Croton thought, well, that's cool and all, but I'll be fucking dead, man. Like, what about now? And then, since Heracles was a god, he obviously heard his thoughts, and then smashed his fucking brains out and threw some dirt on him, yelling, doesn't matter now, huh? Huh, you ungrateful little bitch. What? You're dead now. Why does it matter? And left, leaving Croton's wife and children staring in horror at the partially covered, mangled body of Croton. Ovid's claim that he was reporting a well-established tale of the city's origins appears to be born of the versions recorded by Strabo and Dionysius of Halicarnassus, as well as other no longer existing sources. These variants do provide details not in Ovid. Among these was the legend that Marcellus was assisted in founding a colony at Crotone by Archias, the future founder of the Greek colony at Syracuse in Sicily. The colony was led forth under the sanction of the Delphic oracle, and Marcellus, having previously been to survey the area, had actually wanted the site of Sybaris. So much so that on his return he tried in vain to persuade the Delphic god to allow the colonists to select Sybaris as their place of settlement. But the oracle was like, nah. So Marcellus was sad and accepted his slightly shittier spot. Marcellus established the city in 710 BCE, and it soon became one of the most flourishing cities of the Magna Graecia, with a population between 50,000 and 80,000 around 500 BCE. The inhabitants of Crotone were famous for their physical strength and for their simple sobriety of their lives, much like how the inhabitants of Utah are famous for the Book of Mormon musical and fry sauce. From 588 BCE onwards, Crotone produced many generations of winners in the Olympics because they were fucking champions who only skied it out, track and field stars, star babies. Failure was not a fucking option for them. Milo of Crotone was the most famous of these champions. According to Herodotus, the physicians of Crotone were considered the foremost among the Greeks. And that's right, not only did they have big muscles, but they had big fucking brains. Because you can't throw a discus far without also understanding the exact amount of force you can safely apply to your scapula inferior angle and not tear it, ending your Olympic career. Pythagoras founded his school, the Pythagoreans, in Croton in 530 BCE. The Pythagoreans acquired considerable influence with the Supreme Council of 1000 by which the city was ruled. All right. So that kind of brings us up to the time where the battle supposedly begins. So we have the background on these places. Let's first go through the story that was told by Athenaeus, which is considered to be a fable, and then we'll dive into what modern scholars have found to be true and what they have found to be fiction. So let's go ahead and get to the story. Unfortunately, the first 14 passages of Athenaeus' account is really just him shitting on the Persians. Like just straight taking a fat dump on them. He talks about how all the Persians are just like so fancy and how all the Greek historians love the Persians because of how wealthy they were. And that's why all the Greeks and all the Persians suck ass because they love luxury. Anyways, the story goes by Athenaeus. The tables of the Sicilians also are very notorious for their luxury. And they say that even in the sea in their region is sweet, delighting in the food which is procured from it, as Clearchus says in the 5th book of his life. And why need we mention the Sybarites, among whom bathing men and pourers of water were first introduced in fetters, in order to prevent their going too fast, and to prevent also their scalding the bathers in their haste. Essentially saying, they use slaves, like the Sybarites use slaves, like we use a bath faucet to either heat up or cool down a bath. Which then makes me wonder, how many slaves do you think were just violently beaten for making the water just a bit too hot, you know? Just like when you put your foot in and you're like, oh, hot. And it makes me wonder if some of the interactions just kind of went kind of like this, like, oh, slave, the water is getting a tad too lukewarm. Add some of the hot water, please. And then the slave goes and does it the regular amount that he thinks his master is going to like. But then just by an accident, just by a hair, a little bit of extra water gets in there, and he goes like, oh, you buffoon! How dare you burn my whittle toesy woses! Pity! You are such a good poor. Other slave, bring this slave's child over here, then hold his eyes open as my dear Acreus whips him to death. Whips or beats him, I don't know, either one. Then during the middle of it, I want you to teach that child how to pour water properly, and any time he makes a mistake, you make him watch the lashings his father's receiving. And I don't care if he's dead, you keep beating him until the child gets the water pouring right. All right, thank you. Run along now. Go and do it. And they're assholes, so that probably could have happened. Anyways, Athenaeus continues the fable saying, "And the Sybarites were the first people to forbid those who practiced noisy arts from dwelling in their city, such as blacksmiths and carpenters, and men of similar trades, providing that their slumbers should always be undisturbed, because they need their beauty sleep. And it used to be unlawful to rear cock in the city," which, I mean, could you imagine if like it was just perfectly legal back then just to whip your dick out? Actually, I bet it was at some point. I bet you could just whip your dick out in the city, it's totally fine. But then like some asshole just got a little too rambunctious with it, and they're like, "Jerry, fucking stop! I'm tired of seeing your dick. Knock it off." And they go back to their other buddies and like, "Jerry, man, he just keeps fucking whipping his dick out. I'm tired of it." And so that's why they make the law. I know that it means that they're referring to a rooster here and it being illegal to have it within the walls because the rooster would be noisy in the morning. I know it's not an actual cock. I just like to pretend. It makes it fun for me. Anyways, Timaeus relates concerning them that a citizen of Sybaris, once going into the country, seeing the farmers digging, said that he himself felt as if he had broken his poor little baby bones by this sight. And then someone who heard him replied, when I heard you say this, it felt as though I had a pain in my side." And once at Croton, some Sybarites were standing by some of the athletes who were digging up dust for the palestra, and said they marveled that men who had such a city had no slaves to dig the palestra for them. God, they're so spoiled. But another Sybarite, coming to Lacedaemon, and being invited to the Fididitium, sitting down on a wooden seat and eating with them, said that originally he had been surprised at hearing of the valor of the Lacedaemonians, but that now he had seen it, he thought they in no respect surpassed other men. For the greatest coward on earth would rather die 1,000 times than live and endure such a life as theirs. Holy fuck. Oh man, I'm so glad they get killed. Athenaeus really goes hard here on painting them as these whiny, lazy sacks of shit. But it should be mentioned that he wasn't the only one to do so. And pretty much most of the sources from that time paint the Sybarites as these lazy sacks of shit. Continuing on now. "And it is a custom among them that even their children, up to the age when they are ranked among the ephebes, should wear purple robes and curls braided with gold. It is a custom with them also to breed up in their houses little mannequins and dwarfs, as Timaeus says, who are called by some people stilponas, which means dwarfs in Greek, and also little Maltese dogs, which follow them even to the gymnasia." They were essentially, these essentially were the ancient Greek equivalent of Paris Hilton and those California tiny dog moms, which, again, it makes sense now why everybody fucking hates them. Anyways. "And it was these men, and men like them, to whom Manissa, king of Mauritania, made answer, as Ptolemy relates in the 8th book of his commentaries, when they were seeking to buy some monkeys, 'Why do not your wives, my good friends, produce any offspring?' For Massinissa was very fond of children, and kept about him and brought up the children of his sons, and of his daughters equally. And he had a great many of them, and he brought them all up till they were 3 years old. And after that he sent them to their parents, having the younger ones to take their places. And Eubulus, the comic writer, has said the same thing in his Graces. For is it not, I pray you, better far, for one man, who can well afford such acts, to rear man, than a loud gaping goose, or sparrow, or ape, most mischievous of beasts?" And Athenodoros, in his treatise on serious studies and amusement, says that Archytas of Tarentum, who was both a statesman and philosopher, having many slaves, was always delighted at his entertainments when any of their children came to his banquets. But the Sybarites delighted only in Maltese puppy dogs, and in men which were no men. Which essentially means these people were like, man, fuck kids. I've got dogs and I've got little people to fuck with. Like, you know what's up? Fucking, which I know that Athenios right here is trying to push this message. He's trying to push a couple different messages in this tale. This one I can kind of agree with, and I think is actually pretty applicable to nowadays, since there's a lot of people my age, being 25 plus, that or younger, are deciding that they don't want to have kids at all. That it would be too much work or to be too hard or they're not going to be good enough. To which I say, you don't fucking know what's going to happen in 10 years. Like, how the fuck do you know that? When I was 16, I had no fucking clue what I was going to be doing. And honestly, like looking back on it, I definitely did not have a game plan down. Definitely did not understand like where I was going to be at in 10 years. I'm coming up on that 10-year mark from 16. So I just think it's a little silly. It's a little silly to just assume that maybe, that you should make a permanent decision that you don't understand where you're going to be at in 10 years. And you might regret that permanent decision or not. Maybe just do your best to prevent it, because if you don't want to have kids now, great, don't have kids now. But you don't know where you're going to be like when you're 35 or maybe even 40. And I guess if you really want to adopt, then adopt. But it is pretty nice to have your own kids. Not going to lie. I love my 2 kids. They're great. Fucking adorable. And it wouldn't change a thing wouldn't change anything in the world for them. Anyways, let's, I'm not going to little judge. That's just my own personal belief. My own personal belief is people should think before they make decisions and really think, not just make it like an impulse choice, essentially. And Athenios continues on. The Sybarites used to wear also garments made of Malaysian wool, from which there arose a great friendship between the 2 cities. As Timaeus relates, for of the inhabitants of Italy, the Sybarites gave the preference to the Etruscans, and of foreigners to the Ionians, because they were devoted to luxury. But the cavalry of the Sybarites, being in number more than 5,000, used to go in procession with saffron-colored robes over their breastplates. And in the summer their younger men used to go away to the caves of nymphs of the river Lucias, and live there in all kinds of luxury. And whenever the rich men of that country left the city for the country, although they always traveled in chariots, they used to consume 3 days and a day's journey. And some of the roads which led to the villas in the country were covered with awnings all over. Oh, how fancy. And a great many of them had cellars near the sea, into which their wine was brought by canals from the country. And some of it was then sold out of the district, but some was brought into the city in boats. They also celebrate in public numbers of feasts. They honor those who display great magnificence on such occasions with golden crowns. Kind of like, like hot dog eating competitions, and how we reward them with like money or something. Anyways. And they proclaim their names at public sacrifices and games, announcing not only their general goodwill towards the city, but also the great magnificence which they had displayed in the feasts. Like, good on you, Jerry. You ate 500 hot dogs. Fuck yeah. Which we do now. It's great. We do a lot of the same shit that they're doing. And on these occasions, they even crown those cooks who have served up the most exquisite dishes. And among the Sybarites there were found baths in which, while they lay down, they were steamed with warm vapors. And they were the first people who introduced the custom of bringing chamber pots to banquets, but laughing at those who left their countries to travel in foreign lands. They themselves used to boast they had grown old without ever having crossed the bridges which led over their frontier rivers. But it seems to me that besides the fact of the riches of the Sybarites, the very natural character of their country, since there are no harbors on their coasts, and since in consequence nearly all of the produce of the land is consumed by the citizens themselves, and to some extent also an oracle of the god, has excited them all to luxury, It has caused them to live in practices of most immoderate dissoluteness. But their city lies in a hollow, and in summer is liable to excess of cold both morning and evening. But in the middle of the day, the heat is intolerable, so that the greater part of them, which believe that the rivers contribute a great deal to the health of the inhabitants, on which account it has been said that a man who, living at Sybaris, wishes not to die before his time, ought never to see the sun either rise or set. And once they sent to the oracle to consult the god, and one of the ambassadors was named Amiris. Thanks, Athenias, I needed to know that. And to ask how long their prosperity should last. And the priestess of Delphi answered them, "You shall be happy, Sybarite, very happy, and all your time and entertainments pass, while you continue to the immortal gods the worship due. But when you come, at length, to honor mortal man beyond the gods, then foreign war and intestine sedition shall come upon you, and shall crush your city.
And yea, shall your bowels be loosed upon the streets, as all who die defecate their toga. So shall that neighbor be given fair warning, and bring with them 1,000 rolls of Costco toilet paper."
And then the Sybarites were very confused, and asked, What doth thou meanest by Costco? And the oracle no longer spoke to them, sitting only in silence. Obviously kidding. No. After the "and shall crush your city," the rest of where I changed, you know it was fake. At least I hope you do. When they heard this, they thought the god had said to them that they should never have their luxury terminated, for that there was no chance of their ever honoring a man more than God. But in agreement with the oracle, they experienced a change of fortune, when one of them, flogging one of his slaves, continued to beat him after he had sought asylum in a temple. But when at last he fled to the tomb of the father, he let him go, out of shame. Because he had this particular owner who was whipping his slave really liked the slave's father, who was super good at pouring water and kind of regretted beating him to death. And was like, "Oh, it's fine, let him go. I also miss that water pouring slave," or whatever his name was. Could you fucking... It was the same guy, he just, from earlier. Oh, that'd be great. But their whole revenues were dissipated by the way in which they rivaled one another in luxury. And the city also rivaled all other cities in luxury. And not long after this circumstance, when many omens of impending destruction, which it is not necessary to allude to further at present, had given them notice, they were to be destroyed. But they had carried their luxury to such a pitch that they had taught even their horses to dance, at their feasts, to the music of the flute, which was said to have been played primarily by the famous Sybarite artist Merdigos, and the most famous of songs he made was Afereste di Masca, which goes like this.
Yo, Percocet,
yeah, I had to Google how to say future and how to say mask off in Greek for that joke. So I hope you appreciated that. Sorry. Anyways, accordingly, the people of Croton, knowing this and being at war with them, as Aristotle relates in his history of the Constitution of Sybaris, played before the horses the tune to which they were accustomed to dance. For the people of Croton also had flute players in military uniform, because that's what you do back then. You fuck people up and you sing songs. And as soon as the horses heard them playing on the flute, they not only began to dance, but ran over to the army of the Crotonians, carrying their riders with them. Really fucked them over. Which I really do like to picture this battle taking place, and there's a bunch of people just doing the like from Mask Off, and they have like some singers just singing like Percocet, and they're stabbing people. Like, yeah, Molly Percocets. And then the Sybarites are like begging for their lives, like, "Oh God, please no, just help me." It's just rip the suit. You gotta fucking die, gang. Oh man, I think I might have some mental issues. But you know what? Not the worst song to be murdered to. So Athenaeus goes on saying, and Charon of Lampascus tells a similar story about the Chaldeans in the second book of his annals, writing as follows. The Bisalte invaded the territory, which, by the way, fucking twice that this happened. This would be like two tales, essentially, that were apparently really well known back in Roman times, of armies training their horses to dance for some fucking reason. Anyways, and Chaldeans and conquered them. The general of the Bisalte was Onaris, and he, while he was a boy, had been sold as a slave in Chaldea. And having lived as a slave to one of the Chaldeans, he had been taught the trade of a barber. And the Chaldeans had an oracle warning them that the Bisalte would someday invade them. And they very often used to talk over this oracle while sitting in this barber shop. Which, I know they're, consulting about it, that's what it means, but I imagine, the oracle is, inside the barber shop just being like, guys, you're gonna fucking die. And they're all just kind of chatting, joking to themselves, and listen to me, I'm a future teller, they're gonna invade, and that barber, and, they keep joking about it. Just ignoring him, being like, oh, yeah, man, I just got back from the war, it was a good time, we had fun, I don't think we're ever gonna get invaded. And Onaris, escaping from Chaldea to his own country, prompted the Bisalte to invade the Chaldeans because they weren't fucking listening, and was himself elected general of the Bisalte. But all the Chaldeans had been in the habit of teaching their horses to dance at their feasts, to the music of the flute. And they, standing on their hind feet, used to dance with their forefeet in time to the airs with which they had been taught. Onaris then, knowing these things, got a female flute player from among the Chaldeans, and this female flute player, coming to the Bisalte, taught many of their flute players, and when they had learned sufficiently, he took them in his army against the Chaldeans. And when the battle took place, he ordered the flute players to play the tunes which they had learnt, and which the horses of the Chaldeans knew. And when the horses heard the flute, they stood up on their hind feet and took the dancing. Percocet, Molly Percocet. Just again, it's just futures everywhere. But the main strength of the Chaldeans was in their cavalry, so they were conquered. He doesn't explain this, but in this version of the tale, and I'm certain many of you have heard the tale before. Just to clarify, the Sybarites are not immediately fucked over and destroyed, and are instead allowed to live instead of being immediately fucked over, which is cool. They get to live for a few more months. So the tale goes on. And one of the Sybarites, once wishing to sail over to Croton, hired a vessel to carry him by himself, on condition that no one was to splash him, and no one else was to be taken on board, and that he might take his horse with him. And that's all the conditions. You're gonna fucking listen to me because I'm rich. And when the captain of the ship had agreed to these terms, he put his horse on board, and ordered some straw to be spread under the horse. And afterwards he begged one of those who had accompanied him down to the vessel to go with him, saying, I have already stipulated with the captain of the ship to keep along the shore. But he replied, I should have great difficulty in complying with your wishes if you had been going to walk along the seashore, much less can I do so when you're going to sail along the land. I can't, I'm not fucking Magic Man. I'm not going to just have my boat go along the coast the whole time. Assholes. But Philacrus, in the 25th book of his history, having said that there was a law at Syracuse that women should not wear golden ornaments, nor garments embroidered with flowers, nor robes with purple borders, unless they admitted they were public prostitutes. Because, obviously, if you're gonna wear golden earrings or necklaces and fancy purple clothes that have sewn in flowers, you're a dirty little slut, and you should be treated like one, clearly. God. For those, just, could you fucking imagine, you just, well, I guess that is kind of like shit that people did not even that long ago and still do today. You wear certain clothes and you're a dirty little whore. Oh, man. So, yeah, for those who have a hard time with sarcasm with me, with what I just said there, obviously you should be treated like one. That is sarcasm. That was a version of that method being deployed. So Flaccus goes on saying that there was another law, that a man should not adorn his person nor wear any extraordinarily handsome robes, different from the rest of the citizens, unless he meant to confess that he was an adulterer or a profligate. And also that a free woman was not to walk abroad when the sun had set, unless she was going to commit adultery. Yep, no walking abroad after the sunset. You know, you have to admit it. You're looking to treat on your husband, weren't you? That's exactly what you're looking to do. That's what all women who walk alone at night do. They're night walkers. You know, they're fucking people. And even by day, they were not allowed to go without the leave of the regulators of the women. Oh my God! Oh, ancient sexism. Woo! Fun times. At least the men here were also called whores for dressing a certain way. Still fucking wild to be a woman back then. Oh my God, I could not imagine some guy telling me that I can't walk anywhere, otherwise I'm clearly cheating on them. And then he also goes on stating, Flaccus, I say, states that the Sybarites, having given loose to their luxury, made a law that women might be invited to banquets, and that those who intended to invite them to sacred festivities must make preparation a year before, in order that they might have all that time to provide themselves with garments and other ornaments in a suitable manner worthy of the occasion. Well, maybe if you pass more laws that let them have more, liberation, they could just be prepared immediately. Yeah, whatever. And so might come to the banquet to which they were invited. And if any caterer or cook invented any peculiar and excellent dish, no other artist was allowed to make this for a year, but he alone who invented it was entitled to all the profit to be derived from the manufacture of it for that time, in order that others might be included to labor at excelling in such pursuits. And in the same way, it was provided that those who sold eels were not to be liable to pay tribute, nor those who caught them either. And in the same way, the laws exempted from all burdens those who dyed the marine purple, and those who imported it. They then, having carried their luxury and insolence to a great height, at last, when 30 ambassadors came to them from the people of Croton, slew them all, and threw their bodies down over the wall, and left them there to be eaten by beasts. And this was the beginning of great evils to them, as the deity was much offended at it. Accordingly, a few days afterwards, all their chief magistrates appeared to see the same vision on one night, for they thought they saw Hera coming into the midst of the marketplace, and vomiting gall, and a spring of blood arose in her temple. But even then they did not desist from their arrogance, until they were all destroyed by the Crotonians, which is so fucking metal. That vision is so fucking cool. Anyways, but Heraclides of Pontus, in his treatise on justice, says, the Sybarites, having put down the tyranny of Tellus, and having destroyed all those who had exercised authority, met them and slew them at the altar of the gods. And at the sight of the slaughter, the statue of Hera turned itself away, and the floor sent up a fountain of blood. Fucking yeah! So everyone saw a fountain of blood, which is so fucking dope. So that they were forced to cover all the place around with brazen tablets, wishing to stop the rising of the blood, on which account they were all driven from their city and destroyed. And they had also been desirous to obscure the glory of the famous games at Olympia. For watching the time when they are celebrated, they attempted to draw over the athletes to their side by the extravagance of the prizes they offered. Like, hey, Milos, listen, I know you could play for Croton this year, but I've got 50 bitches back here, okay? And yeah, they're all slaves, but they'll do whatever the fuck you want. You come play for us, all right? But Milos was a loyal guy, and he stayed with them. No, and then by the way, that second story talks about Tellus, who supposedly essentially took over and uprooted the oligarchy that was in Sybaris, and then exiled 500 of the richest citizens, kicked them out, sent them over to the Croton, and then wanted them back for some fucking reason. But Pythagoras had convinced the Crotonians not to, let Thales take them, and that's why Sybaris went over with like all the fucking people to fight Croton. We'll go over that just a little more towards the end, though, because it's not accounted for in any other story, and no one is sure if that's real. But again, that imagery of that Hera statue in a fountain of blood, fucking metal. Makes me think about the Slayer album cover, The Hell Awaits, or honestly some art from the video game Diablo, and I just love that shit. It's fucking dope, man. They go on saying, and the men of Croton, as Timaeus says, after they had destroyed the people of Sybaris, began to indulge in luxury, so that their chief magistrate went about the city clad in a purple robe, and wearing a golden crown on his head, and wearing also white sandals. You gotta be fancy with them footwear. It's them athletic footwear right there. He's looking stylish. But some say that this was not done out of luxury, but owing to Democedes, the physician, who was by birth a native of Croton, and who, having lived with Polycrates, the tyrant of Samos, and having been taken prisoner by the Persians after his death, was taken to the king of Persia, after Oretes had put Polycrates to death, and Democedes, having cured Atossa, the wife of Darius, and daughter of Cyrus, who had a complaint in her breast, asked of her this reward, to be sent back to Greece, on condition of returning again to Persia. And having obtained his request, he came to Croton. And as he wished to remain there, when some Persian laid hold of him, and said that he was a slave of the king of Persia, the Crotonians took him away, and having stripped the Persian of his robe, dressed the servant of their chief magistrate in it. And from that time forward, the servant, having on the Persian robe, went round with the chief magistrate to all the altars on the 7th day of every month, not for the sake of luxury or insolence, but doing it for the purpose of insulting the Persians. Oh man, Athenias fucking hates the Persians. Romans did back then, really, just like everybody back then hated Persia. But after this time, the men of Croton, as Timaeus says, attempted to put an end to the assembly at Olympia by appointing a meeting for games with enormously rich prizes to be held at exactly the same time as the Olympian Games. But some say that the Sybarites did this. And the reason why they state that is because the Sybarites would essentially, after their city got destroyed and a few of them escaped, they would come back, try and rebuild Sybaris. They would then get the city destroyed again. They would get it funded by a couple of the cities that they were over, essentially, like the people that paid tribute to them. And Poseidonia was one of those. But that would end up getting destroyed also. And then the third and final time that happened was they pled to Athens and to Sparta to help them against Croton and to get their city back. And Athens ended up joining them. And that kind of it stopped Croton because Croton just wasn't fucking with them anymore at that point. But then the Athenians got really fucking annoyed with the Sybarites. And they're like, well, why do you get to enjoy all these luxuries and we don't? And they're like, well, we have money, so like, that's why, bitch. And then the Athenians were like, yeah, but you can't fight us, and killed all of them. So the Sybarites literally got destroyed because they annoyed the shit out of everyone. And that's the only reason why they were able to continue on. And with that brings us to the end of the fable. So let's go ahead and take a look at what may be true and what might still be fiction. So let's before we get into all the facts, let's talk about Athenias a little more and this fable. Because unlike Herodotus, Diodorus, and earlier ancient Greek writers, later authors from the Roman period denounced the Sybarites. Pretty much most of the Roman, quote-unquote, historians would do this, seeing them as essentially just immoral, pleasure-seeking heathens that were deserving of their destruction and brought divine wrath upon themselves. And unfortunately, because of this, Athenias is the richest source for anecdotes about the Sybarites. According to him, they invented the chamber pot and pioneered the concept of intellectual property, or trademarking, essentially something with remember earlier how I talked about they had that law which would ensure that cooks could exclusively profit from their signature dishes for a whole year. Which, I mean, that's the idea of that is so fucking ridiculous. Because could you imagine if that was still in place and that was something that the US was doing? Just, I want you to imagine if every time you downloaded a recipe from the internet and then cooked it, you were required to pay the chef who wrote it, who created it essentially. Like, let's say you download Gordon Ramsay's beef Wellington recipe, and he had just made it like barely 6 months ago. Well, because we're not within that year mark yet, and you make it, because you make it, this law is going to notify Ramsay somehow, who then gets to break into your house, probably judge your cooking a bit, and then beats the fuck out of you for money with a tenderizing mallet. Because you owe him now, motherfucker. You downloaded and cooked that shit, and he doesn't give a fuck if you purchased the ingredients yourself. That was your choice to use something he came up with. You could have waited a year. Actually, second thought, that'd be fucking dope. Could you imagine that for like reality TV? That'd be great. But yeah, historians give no, like, they considered most of the shit that the Romans said to just be that, just to be shit, because grave sins followed by divine retribution were just elements of fictions at the time. They also point to Athenaeus as the origin of the embellished accounts rather than the historians he cited. He altered details of the original accounts, disguised his own contributions as those of past historians, and invented new information to fit his argument that luxury leads to catastrophe. Kind of like how people attribute tolerance or acceptance leading to all their kids turning gay or some other irrational argument. Because, what is it called? Like a slippery slope argument, essentially, is what he was using. And because of this, a lot of the associations or all of these anecdotes aren't really trustworthy since Athenaeus is a known faker. However, we can cross-reference some other accounts from other historians back then, mostly Greek authors, but some of the Greek authors really just didn't give a shit about Sybaris. And we're like, yeah, I mean, this happened, but I don't fucking know what all happened. I just know this one event happened. Like Herodotus essentially just says, yeah, so 300,000 people fought like 100,000 people and Sybaris got destroyed. And then moves on and keeps talking about Athens versus Sparta and all of his other shit. So you must be asking yourself then, well, if Athenaeus wasn't correct, what events actually occurred, how can you really tell? What a lot of modern historians did is they cross-referenced a bunch of different writers for Sybaris. So they cross-referenced Diodorus, they cross-reference Herodotus, and a couple other ones whose names are escaping me right now. But essentially, from all of this, we're able to tell that a Sybarite army is said to have advanced into the territory of Croton, where it was met at or near the river Trace by defenders who possessed an army of about 100,000 men. It was commanded by the former Olympic wrestler Milo, who was said to be a follower of Pythagoras. Fucking dope. No details of the battle are mentioned by Diodorus, who jumps immediately to the aftermath, and really no one else mentions any of the battle details, which means the musical instruments may have been a piece of fiction made up, sadly. Still, we can pretend that they played something similar to the 2017 smash hit Mask Off.
Yo, Percocet, Miley Percocet.
Oh man, yeah, no, I fucking love that song. I hope you guys do too. I remember when that came out, fucking crushed it. Everyone was jamming to that. But really, another key piece of this is the violent behavior of the Crotonians, which is mentioned by Diodorus, who killed any enemy they found and took no prisoners, is actually very unusual for ancient wars. Diodorus states, on account of their anger, they plundered and utterly desolated the city. A reason for this sudden shift in civility is only found through Mr. Make Shit Up a Lot Athenaeus, where he talked about the 30 envoys from Croton and who essentially got fucked over and killed, which is actually like a very common thing because like a lot of envoys in the ancient world, it's just they're their job just seemed to suck ass. So there are a ton of accounts of messengers being sent out on diplomatic missions and just getting their shit fucked up and are beheaded or, like kicked into the anus hole of Sparta by King Leonidas while he rubs his fake abs on screen. It's great. It's great to be an envoy in the ancient world. The killing of these messengers back then sent out a strong message that no diplomacy was possible and that no shits would be given when it came to fighting. Whenever the murder of the ambassadors happened, and it's possible that it did happen, a lot of people would assume that's the true reason for them plundering the city. It gave Croton more of an excuse to march against Sybaris than the Sybarites had, as the only reason given to them for marching over there is the story of those 500 exiles that they wanted back, where Tellus took over and exiled the 500 richest people. They wanted them back, probably just so you could fuck with them or something. And so, Croton had definitely more of an excuse to go do it. Other accounts given by more reliable authors do tell that Sybaris was rebuilt or just under subjugation for a while and then destroyed. There are some accounts that spies were used in the first battle to discover the Sybarites' weaknesses, and one of the items discussed was how their horses were trained to move a certain way when music played. But no further account is given, and so we don't know if the information was used, at least from what I could find. And that brings us to the end of today's quarrel. So, what do you guys think? What lessons or interpretation of this historical event turned fable did you make? Please let me know by emailing me at historicalquarrels@gmail.com. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on this. For me, I personally took away that, number one, a lot of shit in history was just made up by a bunch of Roman or other authors who had an agenda. That was my main takeaway. Also that you need to have a sort of balance between entertainment and duty. You can't just live your life. A lot of us dream of just being able to live a life of opulent luxury and not being able to do anything, but it just fucks you over because you don't learn any real skills. Or if you did have any skills, you're gonna lose them all, being so fucking lazy like the Sybarites did. I think that's what Athenios was trying to kind of push. That was his main thing. It's luxury is gonna lead to the downfall of society and how life does need to be hard, which life needs to be hard. I agree with that. It doesn't have to be the way he thought it had to be, where you had to just suffer all the fucking time. You have moments of relaxation. You need moments of relaxation. So I think my main takeaway is balance. You got to have a balance in your life, and you can't let these things take over. But oh fuck, man, that tale is just so interesting. I loved all of it. I loved the little stories and anecdotes that he puts. Athenios really tried to push this whole, see, they're fucking lazy. They're assholes. You don't want to deal with these people. I don't want to deal with these people. Listen to the way that they interact with other people. And then just make shit up, being this historian totally said this about them. Fucking crazy. But yeah, that's going to wrap up this topic for us today. Please join us next time where we go over a quarrel that Sultan Ibrahim I had with people who are smaller in size. And more than just that, how a lot of events in his life would lead to multiple wars and multiple battles. Working title for this episode right now is Big Sultan, Little Problems. I want to thank you guys seriously for listening to today's episode. If you liked it, please let me know by leaving a review, sharing it with a buddy you think would enjoy this, or you could sacrifice 30 foreign dignitaries or messengers and then do a fuck ton of shrooms to see if you'll see Hera cause a fountain of blood to appear for you. And then you let me know how that experience goes from prison, all right? I'll be your prison pen, Paul. And also, seriously, if there are any issues with this, let me know. I want to get better at this. I've been having a lot of fun. I think I've revoiced this episode at least 5 times. And I'm not gonna lie, it's because you guys have started listening to it more, and a lot more people have started listening to it. And I want this to be something that I can share with a bunch of people. At first, it was just a project that I wanted to be able to have my kids kind of go back and listen to, so they could listen to their dad talk about a passion that he liked, which is just history. I've always loved history. I loved battles. In particular, I've studied war. I've studied the fall and rise of empires. That was like my shit back in the day. My second idea for a degree that I wanted was going to be world history. And then I was going to like write a book or become an archaeologist. But I ended up learning coding. Had more fun with that. I just didn't want to kind of go through the whole college life. So, but once it started picking up, honestly, last month, I started thinking about it. I was like, even though this is just something for my kids, I probably should, try and make this better anyways for them. So when they listen to it, it's not like a fucking drag. They're just like, oh, yeah, it's dad being boring again. Good old dad. Good old Tyler. And so instead they can be like, oh, dad was kind of funny, or at least he tried to be funny. I don't know. I tried to write jokes, and I hope they work. Hope they're not just fucking weird for you guys. I mean, they're kind of weird, but I like it. I guess that's what matters most, is I like it. But seriously, I appreciate it. I appreciate the fact that you guys are even listening to this now, and clearly been sharing, or at least, I don't know, maybe one or two of you have been sharing it with a bunch of people that have just like randomly listened, and it's really fucking cool. So I want to get better at this. Let me know what bugs you. Am I sucking in too much air? My wife pointed out to me that she could hear my nose breathing during my last episode, and I re-listened to it, and I was like, holy fuck, she was right, I'm a nose breather, shit. So like this whole episode I've been so self-conscious about that, and I know there's parts that I'm gonna listen to, and I'm gonna listen back to and just be like, fuck, I'm breathing through my nose again, or I'm sucking in too much air. No. But yeah, no, I mean, like, even if there's jokes that don't work, just tell me. I'm workshopping a bunch of jokes now because I like telling jokes. I think it's a fun way to look at things, and it makes it more interesting to listen if there's like jokes on the side, or I don't know, something just kind of pull your attention in when some of the longer parts drag on in history. Because I do think it's important to study and know your history, but I also think it's important to not be fucking bored while doing it. Otherwise, you're not going to remember a lot of shit. And sometimes maybe these jokes might pull you away too much, and so you really don't remember any of the shit. But anyways, that's enough of me rambling. I love you guys, seriously. Peace out. Share the knowledge. Have fun. You little quarrelers, or I don't know, whatever the hell you're going to call yourselves. We'll figure out something. Bye-bye.